Welcome to Voice AI Gaming. I'm Riyadh Drebika from Volley. I'm going to talk a bit about what Voice AI Gaming is. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Bina, who will take you through a technical dive on how we build our games. Then I'll speak a bit about designing Voice AI games, and we'll wrap it up touching on the future of Voice AI Gaming, at least how we see it here at Volley. So my name is Riyadh Drebika. I'm the Senior Director of Product here at Volley. I've focused on the TV and specifically Roku platform. Volley, we're the leading voice AI gaming company, and I'll touch on what that actually means in a moment here. And we're based in San Francisco. So Volley was founded in 2016 by Max Child and James Wilsterman. 6 years ago, we were a team of 4 working out in an apartment focused on games for Amazon Alexa smart speakers. Now with about 80 people, we've spent the last 2 years building on TV, specifically developing voice-controlled games for Roku. The Volley app on Roku includes games like Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, and a new karaoke title where you can earn points based on how well you can hit the notes of your favorite songs. So what is Voice AI Gaming? Voice AI Gaming is a focus on games that uses voice as the main method of control and leverages deep learning, machine learning, and now more than ever, generative AI. Voice as a layer of control is not boundless, but it's much more expansive than what's possible with a standard Roku remote without a microphone. With a standard Roku remote, you can control games like Tetris or chess, but beyond that, control becomes much more challenging. Think a D-pad on Nintendo. Often after explaining the basic idea of voice AI gaming, maybe to a potential brand partner or an acquaintance, I get questions along the line of, how would you play a game like Fortnite or Candy Crush with your voice? The short answer is you wouldn't. The key is building experiences that benefit the most by being controlled with voice. Ideally, experiences that could not exist in a compelling way without voice interaction. I'll touch on that a bit more later on, but I'd like to pass it over to Bina, our Senior Director of Engineering, to dive a bit deeper on how we build these voice-controlled experiences on Roku.
Thanks, Riyadh. Hi, I'm Bina. I lead engineering for our games at Volley. This includes all our games across all our platforms, that is mobile, Alexa, and TV. On TV, we are starting with the Roku platform. Let's dive into some of the technical details on building these voice-activated games on Roku. We're going to use Song Quiz as an example here. This is a game that we are actively working on to bring to the Roku platform. In Song Quiz, you listen to a clip of a song and use your voice to guess the artist and title of the song. And based on your guess, you would get points and progress in the game. I'm going to go over some of the details of the system components here and then dive into the flow of audio data in our systems. To start with a little bit of a background here, when we started building games on Roku, we realized that we had to spin up teams to learn Roku's native languages, such as BrightScript, SceneGraph, and develop deep expertise here. We leveraged the Roku developer community and participated in a lot of forums to develop this expertise. We also realized that this was not a scalable and sustainable way to bring additional games to Roku. So we created Oak. What is Oak? Oak is a proprietary framework that allows us to use React. There is a backend component to Oak and a front-end component. On the backend, we write React components that represent SceneGraph nodes, and it gets transpiled into BrightScript commands that are then rendered into SceneGraph components by the front end. We use TCP socket as a communication mechanism between the front end and the back end for bidirectional state updates and event updates. Let's go into some of the other components here. There is a backend service that we develop in TypeScript and use Node.js and Express servers. These are developed using solid principles and it actively serves as a game engine for us that stores state in Postgres and Dynamo databases. We do use Amplitude for all our tracking, and we pipe the tracking events through Segment to Amplitude as well as Snowflake. We do all our error reporting in Sentry and use Kibana for logging. We also use Redis as a caching mechanism. So this is a high-level view of components in an architecture like Songquiz. All right, so let's go into the flow of the audio data in our systems. Following the Songquiz example, here the user will see a screen to guess the title and artist of the song. They will press a button on the remote to answer. On the client here, we would get a key press event. We would open the microphone and start processing the audio data from the user. This will be sent to our backend, which in turn will send it to a speech-to-text service, get the transcript back. We would do additional internal processing here for more accurate recognition and advance the game state and store it, as well as send the state update back to the client. We would also send the transcript to a text-to-speech service and send the audio back to the client. The end result would be that the user would see the results of their guess and the points that they receive appropriately. Hope that gives you an overview of the flow of audio data in our systems, as well as an overall architecture of voice-activated games. Now I'm going to pass it back to Riyadh to talk about design of voice-activated games.
Thanks, Bina. Now I'm going to take some time to talk about designing for voice-controlled games. So when designing compelling voice-controlled games for Roku, it's important to remember three key things. First, choose the right games. Not every game is a good fit for voice-first experiences. Second, prioritize the first-time user experience. This is always important in any product you build, but there are some unique considerations on Roku. And third, finally for today, utilize voice AI as a layer for instruction. Text-to-speech is a powerful way to convey information to users. So the first one here, choose the right games. As we've talked about, not every game is a great fit for voice-first experiences. When choosing what game to build, think, would this be fun to play by yelling at your TV? For us here at Volley, we thought about game shows. They're on TV, people love game shows. The core game is often based around answering out loud. And we saw an opportunity. Most consoles or mobile games that build game show games miss some of the essence of the show. The user doesn't get to call out the answer, and they don't get the feeling of being a contestant on a live show. Jeopardy, for example, has been available on almost every console since NES, and our version of Jeopardy on Roku is the first time a user could play by saying something like US history for $600 or who is Abraham Lincoln out loud. So choosing the right game is the first part of the design experience for Roku. Prioritizing the first-time user experience. So first-time user experience is always important in any product you build. But it is uniquely important for voice-controlled games on Roku. I think about it like this. Someone sees our ad and they've now just discovered there are games on Roku. They've clicked our ad, they're in the Volley app on Roku, and now they've discovered they can play this game by using their voice. Potentially this user has never used the voice search function on their Roku remote, and this is the first time they even knew the device had a voice function. How do you take them through this mind-blowing journey in just 30 seconds? How do you make it intuitive? In my opinion, this is an important place to focus. I don't want to assume a person has played a game or used voice control before, and design an onboarding experience with this in mind. Focus on the first-time user experience. Lastly, when designing voice first games on Roku, think about utilizing voice as a layer of instruction. So we've talked about voice as a way to control a game, but another useful tool we leverage is voice as a layer of informing and educating users. Text to speech is a powerful way to convey information a user may need or help solidify actions you're hoping that user might take, especially on their first experience. A user sees the Jeopardy board with all the categories, then they hear, "Where would you like to start?" Press and hold the OK button and say something like US states for $200. So we're informing them how to use the remote for our game and what they could say to take their first action. The future of voice, at least the way we see it here at Volley. We're in the first stages of voice games on TV. With the advancements of LLMs and generative AI matched with a platform like Roku, we see a future with games that have endless depth, games that could be different each and every time a user plays, with unique interactive dialogue, images, animation, and much more. This also opens the possibility of hyper-personalized experiences. Maybe you want to play a Dungeons and Dragons style game that's set in a Target in 1993. We think these tools will make that dream come true for you. At Volley, we're clearly excited about voice AI gaming on Roku, and we're betting on its success. This market is growing and there's much more to come. I encourage you to think about voice interaction and where it might add fun, increase depth, and improve accessibility for your users. And with that, we'd love to open it up to any questions about developing with voice on Roku.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. We're going to jump into question and answer portion of the panel presentation. So I'm just going to start at the top of the first question that we've got. Oak sounds awesome. Are there any plans to open source this for community support? I think it would lower the entry barrier for new developers by a massive amount.
Hi, sure, I can take that. Yeah, so thank you for the question and for the words of encouragement there. It is definitely something that we are refining currently within our systems. So no plans to open source it as of now, but that is something that we might consider in the future. But right now we are actively working on it and improving the performance of it.
Okay, awesome. Next question. Are you able to capture all audio data so button presses are not needed?
Currently, we still require a user, the Roku system requires a user to engage that request. So they have to give permission, they have to engage the voice to be sent, and as soon as they stop pressing a button, then we stop listening. So it's really in the user control. If Roku adds microphones to the devices and there's other things there, potentially we could leverage that in the future. But for now, it's all in the user's hand to engage and turn on and off the microphone.
Okay, next question. If you need to press a button on a remote to activate voice, can you handle multiple remotes linked to a single Roku? I
As far as
believe,
I'm aware,
yeah.
one remote active at one time. That being said, I think with the Roku app in conjunction with a hardware remote, there may be some potential. We haven't leaned into this, but I think this is more in the Roku support side of things. Could be an interesting thing to play with.
Yeah, to my knowledge, we only support one remote being paired with one device at a time. But I can definitely,
Bluetooth.
I'm being whispered that with Bluetooth you can do multiple. So hot off the press, you heard it here
Good to
first.
know.
Probably not. But yes, apparently Bluetooth you can do multiple. So awesome. Okay, next question. From Hamilton, with Roku being a streaming platform, what's the hardest thing about using Stream app dev tools to build games? And what did you do to solve it?
This would be a good one for Bina.
Sure. Yeah. It is something that we are actively running into right now for sure. And I think the main things that we run into is graphics and animations. So just solving that by keeping our games, limited in the amount of graphics that we have and the type of animations that we can deliver. The interactions being mainly voice controls does help a little bit. And then we solve for latency on our back end, but we are actively pushing the limits of what we can do in terms of using a streaming platform for interactive games. And we are working actively with the Roku developer advocates as well to solve this problem.
Yes. All right. Awesome. Okay. Next question. How do you think games on Roku will evolve in the future? And I think this is a question that I'm going to answer. So games on the Roku platform are currently evolving. We are making investments in it. And we are going to be seeing a lot of changes in the future, nearish future, maybe, but also long term too. So, yes. If you have any questions or you have any inquiries that you want to talk about gaming on Roku, reach out to Gene. He is our head of developer relations. He's been active in our Roku developer Slack the past couple of days, so you can find him there. Otherwise, you can find him on LinkedIn. Yeah, I think that's good. All right. Next question. How are you integrating the voice commands in a custom way? How do you overrule the Roku OS?
Yeah, so we, this is a common, the kind of what I talked about in the talk around first-time user experience, a part of education that needs to happen, which is we aren't actually using the mic button or the Roku OS voice aspects. With user approvals, we get access to the microphone on that OK button press, and we send to our servers. And Volley, we've been working on voice games, not only on the Roku platform, but we have a long history here, as long of a history of voice games as you basically can have. And so we have our own recognition services. Bina talked a bit about, but basically we take that audio, run it through our services, and are able to take actions off of that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, next question. Question from Lucas. Do Oak games support accessibility, especially for those who have speaking and hearing disabilities?
So I guess intrinsically, this is an interesting aspect of voice gaming. What we've actually seen is with voice games, we have created a much more accessible environment for many people. And with our history in voice games prior, it was a lot of the comments we got from users that were really excited to be able to play games. Maybe they don't have full capacity for movement, things like that are there. Now, with the hearing disabilities, that's a very good point. And closed captioning is something that would be possible. We do have some games in production that are utilizing that, not only for the accessibility, but just for a better overall user experience. Most of our games would be playable without audio. They do have visual cues, text, things like that. So I think in my opinion, voice games are actually opening up accessibility overall as a general way. And I think we probably have some more space to leverage the tools that Roku has to increase this even further.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Okay, question from Samuel. How do you handle potential voice recognition errors or ambiguities in game commands?
Yeah, this is a big part of the user experience, the designing of the voice games. So we don't always hear, right? We're not perfect. It's not going to work every time. The question is, what do you do with that information? And I think this comes down to, what some call conversational design. But if I didn't hear you, I say, sorry, can you repeat that? We do it all the time. So it's trying to think about how to make the game work in a similar fashion. So not just guessing, we do our best guess. And like I said, we don't always get it correct. But if we hear something, especially outside of what our expectations are, we try to handle that with the voice prompts to ask a user to basically try again. But we try to make it have context to where they are in the game, try to have variation on these things, try to also solve for problems. Maybe we noticed that they only held the mic down for half a second. Can you press and hold the OK button? Wait a second, and then, say it again. We try to customize the response when we don't handle things correctly to make it feel conversational and get the user back on track. And hopefully we hear it right the second time.
Yeah, and then I'll just add to that, we're also experimenting with different speech-to-text models. So as an example, for Wheel of Fortune, where letter recognition is very important compared to phrases, we use a different model than for Jeopardy, where we're recognizing phrases, and then we work on boosting the models with expected outputs as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we have an internal processing engine that we can work on to improve voice recognition errors as well.
Okay, awesome. All right. So we've got another question. What tools or frameworks have you found most useful when developing voice games for Roku? I've been trying to figure out how to build games for a while.
Yeah, from a development perspective, we don't really use a lot of open source tools and frameworks beyond the ones that I covered. So it's a lot of internal frameworks that we have developed that make game development easier. But beyond that, it is leveraging what Roku has.
Okay. All right. We've got one more question in the queue, and we've got a couple more minutes if anybody wants to sneak one in before we wrap up. This question's from Alexander. How do you balance voice control with traditional remote control inputs in your games? And are there best practices for creating a good user experience?
We think about it, we debate this a lot, actually, when we're developing games and new features, is what should be voice and what shouldn't. Previously, on primarily voice platforms, you don't have to have that debate, but I think Roku and expectations of a user who's sitting in front of a TV, it is a very important decision to make. Generally, the way I look at it, and I think the team here generally, the way we look at it is actions that a user is already very familiar with on the TV, using button presses, we should probably lean into button presses there. For example, if you're selecting what game to play in our hub, between Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, and karaoke, it's probably going to be a little weird if we ask you to do that with your voice. And for example, on Wheel of Fortune, excuse me, previously we had the spin function be a voice command. And it is a bit difficult to figure out how to use button presses and voice commands in the same place. But overall, we want to lean into what the best experience for the user is, what they're most used to and comfortable with in the environment, and then introduce voice when it becomes a better experience. So I think you have experiences that are clearly better with button presses, experiences that are clearly better with voice control, like US states for $400, or answering the formula question. And then you kind of have this middle ground where it really comes down to the creative of what do you think would be best for this experience based on, your user stories. And then as far as best practices for creating a good user experience, I would say kind of what I touched on, but really no assumptions. Can't assume someone's played a game, even on Roku before. Definitely, we try not to assume they've used voice before. And then also we want to talk you through it. So if we didn't understand you or you're having a bad experience, we want to try to make it as conversational and comfortable as possible to help you guide through this experience. On top of that, I think this exact question about voice control versus remote control, think about what would truly be best. What does voice really bring to the table? It's a cool novelty, but more than that, it's a really adds a depth of control that games haven't been able to have. So leveraging that to the advantage of the game.
Okay, awesome. I think we've got, just real quick, we've got one last question. Did you use Scene Graph for developing these games? Hey.
Yeah, we use BrightScript and Scene Graph, and like I said, we have our own proprietary framework that allows us to develop in React, but ultimately what is rendered on the client is Scene Graph.
Okay, awesome. All right, so we are at the end of our scheduled panel time. We're going to take a very short break, 3-minute break before we jump into the last panel of the day, which is going to be our Scene Graph panel. You don't want to miss it. So come back in 3 minutes, and thank you so much.